For a long time now, organizations have measured leadership development by checking a box. Who completed which training program? But we really have to ask, does knowing who finished a course actually tell us anything about a leader's real-world performance? In this analysis, we're going to explore a major shift in how we measure success, moving away from what leaders learn in a classroom to what they consistently do in the flow of their work.
So, here's how we'll break it all down. First, we'll dig into why those traditional training metrics can be so misleading. Then, we'll define a new model called execution measurement. After that, we'll look at the specific behaviors it tracks, compare it head-to-head with the old model, and explore the risks of getting measurement wrong, before we wrap up with the strategic decisions at stake. All right, let's jump right in and unpack the core problem. You see, the very metrics that many organizations depend on can create a false sense of security, because the data shows a huge gap between what people learn and what they actually put into practice.
Now, this slide gets right to the point with a pretty sobering number. Research from Harvard Business Review shows that only 12%, just 12%, of skills learned in leadership training are consistently applied by leaders during their daily operations. That points to a massive disconnect between the investment in training and the actual behavioral return.
And it doesn't stop there. On top of that, McKinsey research tells us that organizations lose about 87% of the value from training content in just 30 days. Why? Well, it happens because without a system to reinforce what was learned, that knowledge just fades away. You might have heard of this as the forgetting curve in action. So this gap, this forgetting curve we're talking about, actually has a name. It's called execution drift. And it's not that leaders are deliberately choosing to ignore their training. It's a natural, almost unconscious deviation from standards that happens when those new behaviors aren't systematically reinforced right there in the flow of work. Okay, this chart you're seeing here really helps visualize what execution drift looks like. That straight line across the top, that represents the organization's standards, the ideal way things should be done. But the wavy line below it shows what actually happens to a leader's behavior over time. It starts to diverge, creating this gap and leading to unpredictable, inconsistent performance. So now that we've defined the problem as execution drift, let's turn to the solution. It's a different approach to measurement altogether, one we call execution measurement.
What's the core idea here? Well, execution measurement is really a paradigm shift. It stops asking, did the leader finish the training module? And it starts asking, is the leader consistently demonstrating the right behaviors every single day? The focus moves from just acquiring knowledge to actually applying it.
This model is really built on a few key principles. First, it focuses on things you can actually see, observable behaviors, not just knowledge or test scores. It also tracks the consistency of actions over time, not just a one-off event. It uses leading indicators, which are the behaviors themselves, rather than lagging ones, like attendance. And maybe most importantly, it embeds this measurement right into the daily workflow, giving you real, clear visibility into the quality of execution.
Okay, so if we're measuring behavior, what specific behaviors are we looking for? Let's take a look at some of the direct indicators that tell you a leader is executing with real consistency.
This approach tracks competencies that are directly tied to getting things done. For instance, is a leader's day-to-day decision-making aligned with company standards? Are they using structured, daily feedback to coach their people? Do they have a predictable rhythm to their leadership activities? And can they spot and correct those early signs of drift in themselves and their teams? These are the kinds of things that are measurable signals of strong execution.
Now we can really put the old and new models side by side. And this isn't just a minor tweak, it's a fundamental difference in what's being measured and why it matters.
This table lays out the distinction very clearly. In the left column, you have completion tracking. The focus there is on knowledge acquisition, and it measures things like training hours after the fact. It basically proves that a learning event happened. Now compare that to the right column, drift detection. Here, the focus is on behavioral application, and it continuously measures adherence to standards during daily work. This provides proof of sustained execution. It's really the difference between taking a single snapshot and watching a continuous video feed.
So relying on these outdated metrics isn't just a little inefficient, it actually creates some pretty significant risks for an organization. Let's dig into the consequences of measuring the wrong things.
And these risks are substantial. First, you get execution blindness, where you have no idea what behaviors are actually driving performance. Then there's wasted investment, all those resources spent on training that just doesn't stick. You also risk cultural drift, as inconsistent leadership slowly erodes your shared values.
And this can all lead to the biggest mistake, misdiagnosing a systemic execution problem as a simple individual skills gap, and you end up trying to solve the wrong problem entirely. So all of this leads us to our final section, which really frames this whole conversation as a critical choice about strategy and risk management. So the question that every leadership team has to answer is this: how do you measure what actually drives performance? Is it checking a box that a course was completed? Or is it the consistent day-in, day-out execution of critical leadership behaviors?
This slide really presents two very different paths. On the one hand, the risk of inaction is pretty clear. You let that invisible performance drift continue, you waste your investment, and you watch your cultural integrity erode. On the other hand, the benefit of shifting to execution measurement is just as clear. You get early detection of that drift, you ensure consistency, you strengthen your culture, and you make it possible for effective leadership to actually scale.
Ultimately, it all comes down to this powerful concluding idea. Leadership inconsistency isn't just an individual failing, it's a system vulnerability. And the only way to correct it is with a system that is calibrated to your culture and designed specifically to measure and reinforce consistent execution. The underlying research for this analysis is recorded in the following publications:
DOI 10.5281/Synodo 17394116, DOI 10.5281/Synodo 17425566, ORCID 0009.0004.6525.5634.
Published by the Leadership Execution Institute.